In 1880, one of the richest men in America made a vow. His daughter had just married a British lord, and Frank Work was furious. He rewrote his will to ensure his bloodline would never again mix with European aristocracy. He called them worthless foreign lords and swore his fortune would die before it crossed the Atlantic. He spent his final years engineering a genetic firewall against the British upper class. It didn't work. His great-great-granddaughter became Princess Diana. His great-great-great-grandson will become King of England. This is the story Frank Work never wanted told. Frank Work was not born into money. He clawed his way from an Ohio farm to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, building a fortune alongside Cornelius Vanderbilt himself. By the 1870s, he commanded an empire worth $15 million. In an age when a factory worker earned $2 a day, Frank Work answered to no one. He had proven exactly what American ambition could accomplish without inherited titles, without aristocratic connections, without the suffocating traditions of the old world, and he despised anyone who hadn't done the same. His daughter Frances grew up in a Fifth Avenue mansion surrounded by crystal, silk, and the quiet hum of generational wealth being built in real time. She was one of the most eligible heiresses in New York City. Suitors lined up for the chance to marry into Frank Work's fortune. But Frances didn't want a Wall Street climber or a railroad heir. She wanted James Boothby Burke Roche, the third Baron Fermoy. James arrived from Ireland with a title, a practiced charm, and empty pockets. He was everything Frank Work had spent his life rejecting. A man who inherited status rather than earning it. A man who needed money because his bloodline couldn't generate it. A fortune hunter dressed in aristocratic cloth. Frank Work saw him immediately for what he was. Frank Work forbade the marriage. He threatened, he raged, he made his position absolutely clear. Frances married James anyway. In 1880, she chose a penniless Irish lord over the richest father in New York. Frank Work responded without hesitation. He cut Frances from his will entirely. He denounced the marriage publicly. He made it known that his fortune would never support what he called worthless foreign lords. The newlyweds moved between continents, Frances clinging to love while James clung to her name. But charm fades quickly, and empty pockets stay empty. Within a decade, everything Frank Work had predicted began to come true. The fairy tale was collapsing around them, and Frances would soon make a decision that proved her father right in ways he never intended. The marriage crumbled exactly as Frank Work had predicted. James Roach's debts mounted faster than his excuses. The title that had seemed so romantic in New York. Ballrooms meant nothing when creditors came calling. Frances watched the man she had defied her father to marry reveal himself as precisely what her father had warned against. Charming, titled, useless. They had 3 children together, but children couldn't save what was already broken. By 1891, Frances had endured enough. She filed for divorce in what became one of the first major transatlantic society scandals of the era. Newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic covered every humiliating detail. The heiress who had chosen love over fortune was returning home, defeated. Frances sailed back to New York with her children. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence on American soil was an admission. Her father had been right all along. Frank Work saw his opportunity. He welcomed Frances back, but his mind was already turning toward the future. His grandchildren carried the Roche name. They held claim to a British title. Everything he despised still lived in his own bloodline. So he did what powerful men do when they want to control what happens after they die. He rewrote his will. The conditions were extraordinary. His grandchildren could inherit his fortune only if they renounced all British titles permanently. They had to abandon the Roche name entirely. They had to legally adopt the surname Work and pledge to remain American citizens for life. No exceptions, no compromises. No foreign lords would ever touch his money. The grandchildren agreed. They became Works, not Roaches. They signed away their claim to the Fermoy title and swore their loyalty to America. Frank Work died in 1911. Believing he had won the war, he'd been fighting for 30 years. His bloodline was severed from British aristocracy forever. His fortune was protected. His legacy was secure. But the dead cannot enforce their wishes, and Frank Work had barely been buried before his grandchildren began plotting to undo everything he had demanded. The ink on Frank Work's grave marker had barely dried before his grandchildren began their rebellion. They had signed his papers, taken his name, renounced their titles. But promises made to a living patriarch feel different when he's dead. Legal challenges followed. Courts debated, and in the end, the restrictions that Frank Work had believed were ironclad proved to be nothing more than an old man's wishful thinking. Edmund Morris Burke Roche, Frances's son, reclaimed the Fermoy title. He became the 4th Baron Fermoy, restoring everything his grandfather had tried to destroy. The Work name vanished. The Roche name returned. Frank Work's carefully constructed firewall had held for less than a generation. But Edmund's choice to reclaim a title was nothing compared to what came next. He married Ruth Gill, a Scottish woman with ambitions that stretched far beyond a minor Irish barony. Ruth Fermoy didn't just want aristocratic status. She wanted proximity to power, real power, the kind that lives in palaces. She cultivated a friendship with the Queen Mother that lasted decades. The Fermoys became regular guests at Sandringham. They moved through royal circles with practiced ease, trusted by the palace, welcomed into its innermost rooms. Ruth Fermoy had transformed a disgraced family line into something respectable. Then she went further. When her granddaughter Diana caught the attention of Prince Charles, Ruth didn't hesitate. She encouraged the match. She vouched for Diana's character. She smoothed every wrinkle that might have derailed the courtship. The woman whose family had been explicitly forbidden from entangling with British aristocracy actively engineered her granddaughter's marriage to the future King of England. On July 29, 1981, 750 million people watched Diana Spencer walk down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral. Frank Work's great-great-granddaughter became the Princess of Wales. The bloodline he had tried to sever from European aristocracy was now one heartbeat from the throne. But Diana's American heritage didn't begin with Frank Work. And it didn't end with him either. The roots reach much deeper than one man's failed crusade. Genealogists tracing Diana's ancestry found far more than one stubborn New York millionaire. Her American roots spread across centuries, tangled through the founding of the Republic itself. She was a distant cousin of George Washington. She shared bloodlines with John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Calvin Coolidge, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. The poet Ralph Waldo Emerson and the financier J.P. Morgan both appear in her family tree. These weren't distant, speculative connections. They were documented lines running through early colonial families, many of whom traced their own ancestry back to King Edward III. The same medieval king who anchored British royalty also anchored the American families that Diana descended from. The Atlantic Ocean never divided these bloodlines as cleanly as anyone believed. Diana carried more American heritage than most realized. Her ancestry crossed the ocean repeatedly, in both directions, over hundreds of years. The separation between Old World and New World was always more myth than reality. Prince William inherited all of it. When he takes the throne, he will carry bloodlines that predate the Revolution. That helped build the American Republic, that Frank Work believed he was protecting from foreign corruption. The throne of England will hold American roots deeper than Frank Work ever knew existed. Frank Work spent his final years trying to sever his family from the British aristocracy forever. He rewrote his will, demanded his grandchildren change their names, and made them swear oaths of American loyalty. He believed he could reach across time and dictate who his descendants would become. He was wrong. Within 2 generations, his bloodline didn't just return to British nobility. It claimed the highest position the aristocracy offers. His great-great-granddaughter became the Princess of Wales. His great-great-great-grandson will sit on the throne of England. The man who called British lords worthless now has descendants who will wear the crown. DNA doesn't follow our plans. It carries our legacy whether we like it or not. And sometimes the bloodlines we try hardest to control become the ones that rewrite history. If you want to see what else was hidden in Diana's ancestry, subscribe. That story is waiting.